This is Sister Thage with Freedom Now, and we're joined on the line with our brother Johnny Achi with Arab Americans for Syria. Brother Johnny is an anti-war activist and led a delegation in 2013 to Syria with our ancestors, Lidan Kamati and former U.S. Attorney General Ramsey Clark. And from the land of the living, also on the delegation to Syria, were anti-war activists, former Georgia Congresswoman, our sister Cynthia McKinney, and our brother John Parker, who is a grassroots organizer here in Los Angeles, and Sarah Flounders from the International Action Center. Today, Brother Johnny Achi joins us to discuss Syria's stance on the Gaza genocide and more. Welcome back to Freedom Now, Brother Johnny.
Thank you, Sister Thage, for having me back. Always a pleasure to be back with you and on the show, Freedom Now.
And thank you so much for your commitment to anti-war activism and all you do for humanity, Brother Johnny. We first wanted to ask if you can update our listeners on Syria's stance on the genocide happening in Gaza by Israel and their Western-backed allies.
You know, Sister Thage, it feels like a full circle coming around, with the Syrian war that's been waged for 12 years now. And I remember first time I came on the show, Freedom Now show, with the late Lidan Makati, God rest his soul. It was with the Honorable Congresswoman Cynthia McKinney. And I was asked the question, why Syria? And at the time, a lot of people didn't understand, the Syrian crisis at the time. A lot of people were bought into that there is a real revolution. And the word revolution kind of confused a lot of people on the progressive side. So I was trying to tell them that it was the reason all behind it is the Syrian support to the Palestinian cause and the Lebanese resistance at the time. And how many times had the Syrian president been offered cut ties with Iran, cut ties with the Palestinian resistance and the Lebanese resistance, and this revolution can be turned off. I know for Syria, with that delegation in 2013, I took that message with me. So we knew, and we still know today, that Syrian, out of all the Arab world, were the sole supporters of the Palestinian cause. And you say, why? Because our Palestinian brothers are part of the Syrian population. For the longest time, Palestine has been part of Syria. So it's south of Syria. And we know the Israeli Zionists, I shouldn't even say that, vision is. Ben Gurion did not hide it in 1948 when he stood in front of the world and talk about Eretz Israel. Eretz Israel, or Greater Israel, is Greater Syria. So it would not stop in the 1948 land. It would not stop in the 1967 occupation of Gaza and the West Bank. It would not have stopped in 1982 invasion of Lebanon. It would have continued. So Syria has protected itself by protecting its brothers, the Palestinians. And when we stopped the Lebanese invasion and they were able to finally kick him out in 2000, that's the turnaround point where we're told, finally there was an axis of resistance strong enough to tell Israel and the Zionist state, there's no more expansion policy. You've got to either accept to live in peace or you're never going to have ever peace. So what happened when today our vice president was asked, why not listen to your core supporters asking for a permanent ceasefire? She said, well, let me tell you why. Let's go back to October 7th. And I was just stunned that after 180 days of genocide carried against a defenseless, imprisoned population, she was able to still say, let's go back to October 7th, as if we didn't know, or the world doesn't know today that this did not start on October 7th. The whole world today know that this October 7th was a result of something before October 7th, that the Palestinians had every right of 75 years of oppression to rise, and it is their legitimate right to resist an occupier. They are resisting an occupier. For people who tell me Israel has the right to defend itself, no, Israel does not have the right to defend itself in a country that it's illegally occupied. It's the Palestinian people who have been terrorized for 75 years have the right to self-defense and have the right to armed resistance. It's their not just God-given right, it's international law right, give them the right to legitimate resistance. So what we have seen in the last 180 days is a pure evil unleashed on innocent population. The image of the Zionist state, and I can tell you if we had come up out of something out of this, is the world now knows the story. We've been telling the story for 75 years, but now thanks to October 7th, the whole world now knows that the word Palestine now is in everybody's mind. People go to sleep at night praying for Palestine, praying for the children of Palestine, something never existed in the United States or anywhere else in the world. So the image of the Zionist state is tarnished forever. It'll never go back to what it used to be prior to October 7th. It revealed to the world what we already knew, its true nature of its thirst to the blood of children, its thirst to the blood of civilians, its extremism that had been hidden under the propaganda of the West mainstream media. But with all the suppression and all this, everything they could have done in the mainstream media, I think the wave was too strong. Even on social media, we've been suppressed and we've been shadow banned, but the movement has been incredible. And if I go back and say the 41,000 today, the Euromed Human Rights Monitor just released new figures. And I still think these figures are not, because for the last 2-3 months, there's no civil registry. Nobody knows who's killed and who's missing under the rebels. But the new figure says after 180 days, 41,496 Palestinians killed, with more than 15,370 children. These are not just numbers. We get used to numbers and we just keep thinking it's just numbers. Well, I want to today put it in terms for our listeners to understand it. I want to scale it. I want to scale it to United States population. Number one, I want to talk about is the 365 square kilometers that the population of 2.3 million Gazans live in. That 365 square kilometer equate to about 6,400 person living per 1 square kilometer. 6,400. To put it in perspective, Sister Tej, and you're from Southern California, think of the 333 million that lives in the United States. Take all of them, everybody in New York, and all of the 50 states, and put them in San Bernardino County. That's how you get 6,400 people living in 1 square kilometer. Take all 333 millions, put them in San Bernardino County, you would come to exactly 6,400 people per 1 square kilometer. Now, siege them in that space, prevent them from getting water, electricity, food, medical attention, bomb all the hospitals. They cannot run anywhere, and continue to bomb them for 180 days straight, where they cannot exit, they cannot get anywhere. That's how these 2.2 million Palestinians have been going under. That 41,496 killed, plus the 77,000 injured, equate to almost 6% of the Palestinian population, which would have meant 20 plus million out of the 330 million that lives, say, in San Bernardino, have already been killed or seriously injured. The injuries, when we say injured, this is not a bicycle accident. These are injury from monstrous bombs. Thousands and thousands, tens of thousands of tons of bombs been falling non-stop days and nights. The 15,370 children killed would equate to 2.2 million. Think about 2.2 million American children killed in 180 days equates to 85 children a day. That's why we should not stop sharing and talking about Palestine, because every hour equal the death of 4 children. When we go to sleep at night for 8 hours, think about 32 children gonna be killed by the time I wake up. So I command the progressive movement in the United States. I command everyone doing what they can, but it's not enough. The only thing would be enough is to stop this maniac Netanyahu from carrying this genocide. We need to stop it now. It is ridiculous that we continue to talk about aid, food. These people don't need food. They need to stop the bomb from falling over their head. They have not had one good night's sleep. The trauma these kids have gone through, 180 days of continuous bombing, carpet bombing of place the size of San Bernardino County with a population of 330 million. Just think about all that, Sister Tej, and that's what they're going through. So we owe it to them, the whole world owe it to these Palestinians to stop their suffering. This is a genocide. This is a Holocaust. Let's call it for what it is and stop beating around the bushes.
Thank you, Brother Johnny. Just to remind our listening audience that we are speaking with our brother Johnny Achi with Arab Americans for Syria. And so next we wanted to ask, what is your reaction to the Israeli bombing of the Iran legation in Syria?
I'm just going to say that this continue. It's in the same, again, coming full circle. Mr. Netanyahu, he is such an insane being, because no sane being would bomb a consulate. This has been known from old eras. I mean, you can talk about every war. Diplomatic buildings are always immune. That's why, for example, Assange, may he be released soon, praise to God if he does, but he's been hiding in consulates because no one can get to him, because that is foreign entity inside someone else's land. So is Israel been bombing Syria occasionally? Non-stop. When did it start? Back in 2012, back in 2011. From the first year of the Syrian war, Israel has been a big part in supporting the Syrian opposition, what we call terrorist factions in Syria, always in coordination. So finally hitting an embassy, a consulate in Syria, it's as if they hit Iranian soil. So this man is mad enough that he wants to physically go to a regional war. He knows there is no way out for him. He's lost in Gaza. No matter what he thinks he's doing, he hasn't accomplished one thing other than being hatred from the whole world. He has not was able to succeed in releasing any hostages. He killed and destroyed the population of civilians, has not been able to stop Hamas or the fighters of Hamas. We have not seen one Hamas fighter wearing an army fatigue ever shown. All we see is children and women. His only way out is a regional war. He wants to drag Mr. Biden into this regional war, and the only way it can happen to go and bomb, and hopefully he is hoping, he is actually taunting Iran to, I mean, if you read the Haaretz today, all the newspaper in Israel is actually talking about Israelis are preparing for a bombing of inside Israel. Now we know Iran, and I know that would not be retaliating at the time, and that Israel wanted to, they'll save it for the day at their own timing, right? But there is nothing can save Netanyahu more today than an all-out regional war. And that is specifically why he targeted the consulate. Now, if the question is why they're targeting Syria, they've been, like I said, targeting Syria. If you go back just 1 week ago, last Thursday was one of the strongest bombing that Israel carried out in northern Aleppo. Think of northern Aleppo, so far away from the Syrian border with the Zionist state. What did they target? An artillery depot that was used to fight the terrorist groups in Idlib. That is north of Aleppo. This 56 people that were killed, they were fighters against the Syrian army to fight the terrorist group in Idlib. It was coordinated like never before. 45 minutes of coordinated attack by two terrorist groups, Tahrir al-Sham THS and Al-Nusra Front. Al-Nusra Front, which is an offshoot of Al-Qaeda, they are the two groups in Idlib today, which is the last, what we call hotspot left in Syria. And the Syrian army is preparing for that day, and it was gonna happen very close, and it still could happen very close. But to see THS and Nusra Fronts attacking the same moment that Israel is attacking with their fighter jet, they're attacking with drones and different, that tells you that Israel is so embedded with the Syrian opposition that it's ridiculous to think otherwise. So would Iran retaliate? They have every right to retaliate. Will Syria eventually retaliate? They will have every right to retaliate, but they will not be on the time when Netanyahu decides. It would be on the time of our own choosing. Syria will continue its focus in Idlib because Israel cannot afford to see Syria relaxed, because they know once we're done with Idlib and then we take care of the east of Euphrates, and maybe we'll get a time to talk about that, what's happening in the east of Euphrates with the American occupation there. But where else we're going to turn? We're going to turn to the southern front. The southern front meaning the Golan Heights, and strongly support our brothers in Palestine and in Lebanon to join that fight. So yes, very deliberate attack, and with a lot of help on the ground from Syria, because we still have a lot of people in Syria that are Mossad paid, are CIA paid, are MI6 paid, and all that in mind, it is a big event. That tells me that international law is dead. Anybody who ever wants to talk about the Vienna Convention on Diplomatic Relations, I'm going to say, please keep it shut. I don't want to hear anybody ever talk to me or let me know that this is against this Geneva Convention or against international law, because to me, international law is dead. It depends on who those laws is applied against. So I think the world has had it. The United Nations body, every nation in the United Nations understand that these laws only applied against the weak, never against the oppressors. Because if they couldn't do anything about this today, I don't think anyone should ever be lecturing us about international law, democracy, and the Geneva Conventions.
Right. And so what is the current role of the U.S. in all of this?
Excellent point. Obviously, if you ask me about in Syria, I'll get to that in a minute. But let's talk about the U.S. role in Palestine. Again, it is sad that one country, even before October 7, had broken 56 United Nations resolutions and was never, ever, there's no consequences. For 56, no other nation in the world broke. Iraq Iraq broke two United Nations resolution, was attacked, invaded, bombed, and destroyed. But Israel gets a free pass to do whatever they want. And it's more evident now than ever. I think if anybody could now see, and it's incredible how Biden can look at the American public in straight face and lie to them and tell them, we care about the civilians. They care about civilians. That's why they want to build a marine pier. They want to build a pier. Whereas the land, we have thousands of trucks ready, willing, and able to they've been parked, but they can't get them in. But they have to go and build the marine. Why? Because we should not allow people to starve to death. So it's okay to let them die by bombs, but no, not by starvation, because on their conscience, they cannot allow. This is a humanitarian crisis if you allow them to die by starvation. So it's okay. Let's send aid. Do not let them die by starvation, but at the same time, continue to send weapons so we can bomb them and they can die by bombs, because that's collateral damage. But if they die by starvation, it would look bad for a country like the United States, who's supposed to be protecting the human rights and should be worried and caring about people in famine and starvation that is manufactured by 180 days of genocide. So the American stance on all of this is ridiculous, is egoistic. It's shameful to talk about AIDS, famine, when you can just stop sending weapons. What is the point of sending them food when you're sending more weapons to bomb them? So you don't want them to die by starvation, but you want them to die by the atrocities that committed and the no consequences on the Zionist state tells the world where America's heart and mind and soul is, in the gutter, in the darkness, in evil times. So we need to do something beyond counting on our administration. This Biden administration has been exposed. So did this every Western nation. Today, because of 7 European, the world's central kitchen workers, 7 of them were sadly bombed, but the whole world now is calling on their Israeli ambassadors. Australia recalled the Israeli ambassador to tell him 1 Australian civilian was killed. And so 41,496 brown killed in 180 days. You did not call on the ambassadors to have a word with him, but one white or 7 white required that now you want to have consequences. And Biden calling Netanyahu today and telling him this cannot be continued and this has to stop. I'm done with hearing you say things. Go ahead and do something. Do something about it. If it wasn't for the 41,496 killed Palestinians, do it for the 7 European. You know, there was an interview today with the founder of the World Central Kitchen, but he did talk. Those 7 were killed deliberately. The humanitarian workers were trying to deliver food, and the reason they were killed, and the reason, I think his name is Jose, said that because they were in constant communication with the IDF. They'd given them the route. It was a demilitarized route. They were in constant communication at all times. This was not a mistake. They have GPS. They can send a drone through a small window to assassinate someone in the middle of Beirut. You want to tell me they missed the convoy of 3 aid workers? They deliberately, and I can tell you why they deliberately did that. For 2 reasons: to stop delivery of food and to continue its deliberate policy of starving millions in Palestine, but most importantly, to discourage other humanitarian missions from coming in. And sure enough, 2 big boats sailed away after this happened because they knew they were going to get killed, because Israel, the Zionist state, are killing those workers. So the U.S. stance on all of this is shameful, is ridiculous, and they should be consequences, and they should be, I think, tried for war crimes alongside Israel. Genocide, war crimes, whatever the Hague is going to be, this cannot be. We talked about it back in the Iraqi war that some people should have been. No one cared, but I think this time we have the whole world witnessing on their phone, on our phone, we're witnessing a genocide taking place today. Not 50 years ago, we couldn't do anything about it. Not 100 years ago, today it's happening in front of our own eyes. If you're asking about the American stance in Syria, I can tell you they are an occupying forces. They're still existing in the eastern of the Euphrates. That is the northern eastern side of Syria, where oddly enough, 2/3 of Syrian resources are there. You know, the oil, the gas, the wheat, and the cotton. That is all northern eastern Syria, and that's where the Americans are still there, supporting obviously the Syrian Democratic Forces, the Kurds there. I'm hoping that they plan to leave soon, because as I said, once Idlib is over, we're going to turn turn now east to the Euphrates, east of the Euphrates. And, Syrians, just like Palestinians, have nothing else to lose. We will fight until the last person, last life left in us, the last breath we can take, because we've paid enough price and there's just no returning. When we could have and been offered to surrender, we said, no, we won't kneel. We will not surrender. So it's time for the oppressors to realize, to let go. It's time to let go, because we will not be silent. We can never be silent again.
Right on. And just to remind our listening audience, we are speaking with our brother Johnny Achi with Arab Americans for Syria. And our final question for you, brother Johnny, is what is your analysis of the Turkish elections and the impact on the Kurdish question and Syria?
I can't say I'm an expert about the Turkish politics, but we know what happened just a few days ago, last week, Sunday. It was a big blow to Erdogan's, just as in the development party. Yeah, you have to also remember Erdogan had been a big piece of the war on Syria, huge element in destroying Syria. The border, 8,000 kilometer wide open border from the north. That's when more than 80 nations sent their mercenaries through those borders. Some came from the south, obviously, but the majority from the north. So the Justice and Development Party, it's what we call Islamist regime, and they supported the Islamist uprising in Syria, the various terrorist groups, and they are currently supporting all this Idlib. What's left in Idlib, they're all supported by Turkey, north of the border. So the big blow that Erdogan's party got in this election means a lot to not just Turkey, but to Syria and to the Kurds in Syria. If I can make sense of it all, I can tell you Syria will benefit for sure, because the bigger winner, the Republican People's Party, I know I've actually was in Syria when they came in and met with President Assad. They were at the time the opposition, and they still are the opposition, by the way, because they only won those local elections. This election that just took place is for, municipalities, mayors, and so on and so forth. But it tells a bigger picture. The bigger picture is 2028, when presidential election is going to come in. The current mayor of Istanbul, I believe, is Ekrem İmamoğlu. He is, I think, who would lead that party now, the Republican People Party, and he would be the only, I think, candidate that can take out Erdogan and his 20 years reign on Turkish politics. So for Syria, remembering that this Republican People Party came twice to Syria to show support to the Syrian president and to let him know that the Turkish people are on the side of the Syrian people and they're not on the side of the terrorist groups, but just Erdogan's government was not behaving on behalf of all Turkish people. And we know the people are not, it's just their government. So this could mean a lot down the road, but what does it mean today for the Kurds in Syria? I think the Republican People Party could not have assured themselves of winning so many municipalities. Most importantly, the 5 biggest cities. They won the mayoral election in both Istanbul, Ankara, as well as Izmir, Antalya, and Bursa, if it wasn't for the Kurdish votes. So you have to understand also the Kurds, probably they're about 15 to 18% of the Turkish population. So there's about 15 million of them. And they're kind of allowed to participate in politics, but they're always considered part of the terrorist groups. Now, the Republican People's Party played it smart, allied with these Kurds. I don't know what promises they made to them, but eventually they would be, once they become in bigger positions and federal positions, maybe they can assure that they can talk about Kurdistan, part of, Turkey, south of Turkey. Would that mean what's going to happen to the Kurds in Syria? The Kurds in Syria have no claim to a Syrian territory. They've never had, geographically, they've never been part of Syria. We welcomed them when they ran from the Turkish. As you know, there's a war been going on, almost 40,000 people killed from both sides between Kurds and the Turkish government, trying to be separating. But in Syria, they would have to play by the Syrian rules. So the YPG that US and Turkey consider to be terrorist group, yet the Syrian Democratic Forces, they are part of, the YPG is part of the Syrian Democratic Forces, but those are the ones that the government support, and the US government, support and rely on. So there's a big conflict between Ankara and Washington, is which Kurds do we want to support? Obviously, Turkey does not want the US to support any Kurds, because all the Kurds in Syria or in Turkey, they have that separatist mentality, right? But we don't, as Syrian, we don't have any issues with the Kurds historically, but we do have a problem with the Americans' presence in Kurds areas and the stealing of our wheat and stealing of our gas and oil. Syria under tremendous, as you know, economic sanctions. So we could be self-sufficient if we can at least get our own resources back into the hands of the Syrian population. Like I mentioned earlier, 2/3 of these resources are in that area. Let go of supporting the terrorist group in Syria. If that's the case, I think that would be a great opportunity for Syria to move into Idlib. And there's a lot of infighting right now happening in Idlib, big time infighting. I'm not sure if you're following, but tremendous infighting between the different groups. And I think it's time for Syria to at least get in there and get back Idlib, and then turn our focus to the east to get rid of the Americans, and then finally turn our most important piece is the Golan Heights Front and support our Palestinian brothers, because I can tell you now more than ever, liberation is coming much faster than it's ever been and much closer than it's ever been.
Right on. Thank you so much, Brother Johnny. We wanted to thank you, Brother Johnny Achi with Arab Americans for Syria, for giving us this very powerful report and update, and we look forward for you to joining us back here on Freedom Now in the near future. Thank you.
Thank you so much.